One routine drive to the basket lasted only a few seconds, but the reaction that followed has turned into one of the most talked about moments of the WNBA season. It wasn't simply because Lexie Hall went to the floor holding her face after taking an elbow during the play. Basketball is a physical game, and accidental contact happens every night. What transformed this from an ordinary hard collision into a league-wide controversy was everything that happened after the whistle. Within minutes, slow-motion replays flooded social media. Fans began arguing over every frame, and millions of viewers were asking the same question: was this just an unfortunate basketball play, or had something much bigger just unfolded? As the replay spread online, attention quickly shifted away from the contact itself and toward Alyssa Thomas's visible reaction after the play. Some viewers believed she appeared to laugh or mock the situation, while others argued the clips lacked enough context to know exactly what she intended. Regardless of those differing interpretations, the moment ignited an intense debate across basketball communities. Suddenly, fans weren't just discussing an elbow during a layup, they were debating sportsmanship, player reputations, and whether certain stars receive more criticism than others. What began as a split-second basketball play rapidly evolved into one of the league's biggest talking points. The atmosphere inside the arena only made everything feel even more dramatic. Every replay on the video board seemed to generate louder reactions from the crowd. Boos echoed throughout the building, and it quickly became obvious that emotions had shifted far beyond the outcome of a single possession. Instead of moving on to the next play, thousands of fans stayed locked on to the incident, reacting every time Thomas touched the basketball. In a league where momentum can change in an instant, this wasn't just another heated exchange between competitors, it felt like the entire arena had picked a side. What made the situation even more remarkable was that the Indiana Fever's biggest star, Caitlin Clark, wasn't even on the court. She was unavailable due to injury, yet her team's presence still dominated the conversation. Thousands of Fever supporters had traveled to Phoenix or already lived nearby, creating an atmosphere that resembled a home game more than a road contest. Even without Clark playing a single minute, the Fever base remained loud, passionate, and impossible to ignore. That unexpected dynamic would become one of the most fascinating parts of the entire story. Almost overnight, the discussion expanded far beyond Alyssa Thomas and Lexie Hall. Fans, analysts, former players, and media personalities began debating whether the league itself was entering a completely new era. Some argued that physical basketball had always been part of the WNBA, and that moments like this were being overanalyzed. Others believed the league's rapidly growing audience had brought new expectations for player conduct and accountability. As more opinions poured in, it became clear this controversy wasn't simply about one elbow or one reaction. It had become a reflection of how quickly the WNBA is changing. And the timing couldn't have been more significant. Attendance numbers are climbing, TV ratings continue to rise, and every nationally televised game now attracts millions of eyes eager to dissect every controversial moment. In today's social media landscape, a single replay can define public opinion before players even leave the arena. Fair or unfair, reputations are increasingly shaped by viral clips rather than full games, and this incident became another powerful example of how quickly narratives can take hold. Once the conversation exploded online, there was no slowing it down. But perhaps the biggest surprise wasn't the collision, the replay, or even the boos. It was what this single moment revealed about the league's changing fan culture. New audiences are arriving every week, rivalries are becoming more intense, and players now find themselves under a level of scrutiny that barely existed just a few years ago. What happened on that court became much more than a controversial basketball play. It exposed a growing divide over toughness, sportsmanship, and the future identity of the WNBA. And as you'll soon see, that collision was only the beginning of a story that became far bigger than anyone inside the arena could have imagined. Everything began with what looked at first glance like a routine basketball play. Alyssa Thomas attacked the basket aggressively. Lexie Hall rotated over to contest the shot, and both players arrived at nearly the same moment. As Thomas went up for the layup, her elbow made contact with Hall's nose. Hall immediately fell to the floor, clutching her nose while medical staff rushed onto the court. The arena fell into a brief moment of uncertainty as players from both teams looked on, trying to understand how serious the injury might be. It was the kind of collision that can happen in a fast-paced game where fractions of a second separate a clean finish from a painful accident. Once television broadcasts and social media accounts replayed the sequence from multiple angles, the debate started almost immediately. Many basketball fans, analysts, and even some former players pointed out that the contact itself appeared consistent with two athletes colliding during a contested layup rather than an intentional strike. Thomas was already in her shooting motion, while Hall stepped in to challenge the play, making the split-second collision difficult to avoid. Others, however, focused less on how the contact happened and more on the outcome, arguing that regardless of intent, the injury was severe enough to deserve an immediate show of concern. From that point forward, the conversation began shifting away from the elbow and toward everything that followed. As Hull remained on the floor receiving attention, cameras naturally stayed fixed on the players involved. This is when the controversy truly exploded. Clips circulating online led many viewers to believe Alyssa Thomas reacted in ways they considered unsympathetic, with some interpreting her expressions and gestures as laughing or mocking the situation. Others argued those short clips lacked enough context to know exactly what she intended. The differing interpretations only fueled the debate further. Instead of everyone discussing the same incident, fans were suddenly arguing over two completely different questions: what actually happened during the collision and what happened immediately afterward.
Within minutes, social media transformed the play into one of the biggest basketball discussions of the day. Slow-motion replays were shared across every major platform, each accompanied by thousands of comments reaching completely different conclusions. Some posts described it as nothing more than an unfortunate basketball accident. Others claimed the visible reaction afterward was the real issue. Every replay seemed to create another wave of debate, with people dissecting body language, facial expressions, and crowd reactions frame by frame. The story had grown far beyond the game itself. What made the situation even more complicated was Alyssa Thomas's existing reputation as one of the league's most physical competitors. Throughout her career, she has built an identity around aggressive defense, relentless drives to the basket, and never backing away from contact. Supporters see that style as exactly what makes her one of the toughest players in the WNBA. Critics argue that her physical approach sometimes pushes the limits of what opponents consider acceptable. Because of that reputation, many viewers interpreted the incident through opinions they had already formed long before this game ever tipped off. Fairly or unfairly, past perceptions became part of the conversation almost instantly. For Lexie Hull, the immediate concern was simply recovering from the injury and getting evaluated by the team's medical staff. Yet while she was receiving treatment, the focus outside the arena was already shifting toward public perception. Television commentators discussed whether intent should matter. Fans debated whether accidental contact excuses everything that follows. Sports talk shows began asking whether athletes should always show concern after an opponent gets hurt, regardless of how the injury occurred. In just a matter of minutes, a routine basketball sequence had evolved into a broader discussion about sportsmanship, accountability, and professionalism. As the game continued, it became clear that the incident wasn't going to fade into the background. Every time Alyssa Thomas touched the ball, the atmosphere inside the arena changed. The crowd reacted louder than before, and the emotional temperature of the game continued to rise. It no longer felt like fans were responding to a single play. They were responding to the narrative that had formed around it almost instantly. And that growing tension would become even more noticeable once it became clear who was filling most of the seats in the building. What happened after the collision became even more remarkable once people realized who was actually creating all that noise inside the arena. This was supposed to be a home game for the Phoenix Mercury, yet for long stretches, it sounded like Indiana had taken over the building. Every big Fever play drew loud cheers, while mistakes by the home team were met with equally passionate reactions. It was an atmosphere that caught many viewers by surprise, because this wasn't Indianapolis, it was nearly 2,000 miles away. Yet the energy suggested the Fever were playing in front of one of their own crowds. The biggest reason was the incredible reach of the Indiana Fever's fan base. Even with Caitlin Clark unavailable because of injury, thousands of supporters still showed up wearing Fever jerseys, carrying signs, and making their presence impossible to ignore. Some had planned the trip months in advance when the schedule was released. Others already lived in Arizona and had been waiting all season for Indiana's lone visit. While many originally hoped to see Clark in person, they chose to attend anyway, turning what could have been a disappointing night into another demonstration of how much interest surrounds the franchise as a whole. Attendance numbers only reinforced that point. The Mercury drew one of their largest crowds of the season for this matchup, far above what they typically welcomed for a regular season home game. Much of the anticipation centered around Indiana's visit, highlighting just how much attention the Fever now generate wherever they play. Even after Clark was ruled out, the arena remained packed, proving that the excitement surrounding the team had grown beyond one individual player. Fans still wanted to experience the atmosphere, support the roster, and be part of what has become one of the biggest stories in professional basketball. That environment completely changed the emotional tone of the game. Every controversial call produced a roar from one side of the arena. Every replay shown on the scoreboard was met with another wave of cheers or boos. Instead of the Mercury enjoying a traditional home court advantage, it often felt as though they were trying to quiet an opposing crowd. The collision involving Lexie Hull only intensified that dynamic. Once the replay circulated through the arena, emotions escalated quickly, and every possession afterward carried noticeably more intensity. For veteran WNBA observers, this represented something much larger than one unusually loud crowd. It reflected how dramatically the league's audience has evolved over the past 2 seasons. Fever road games have increasingly become destination events, drawing traveling supporters and local basketball fans eager to watch one of the league's most talked-about teams. That shift has created environments rarely seen in previous years, where visiting teams can generate playoff-like support even in someone else's arena. Organizations across the league have begun recognizing that an Indiana game often brings heightened attention, increased ticket demand, and far more national discussion than a typical regular season matchup. As the game wore on, the crowd's energy became impossible for the players to ignore. Every time Alyssa Thomas touched the basketball after the incident, the volume inside the building rose once again. What started as frustration over one play had transformed into a sustained reaction from thousands of fans who had clearly chosen a side. In many ways, the atmosphere became almost as significant as the game itself, and as the boos continued to echo throughout the arena, one question became impossible to avoid. Was this simply a reaction to a single controversial moment, or had Alyssa Thomas's reputation already shaped how fans viewed everything she did?
By the time the second half settled in, the game no longer revolved around the scoreboard. Every possession involving Alyssa Thomas seemed to generate another wave of noise from the crowd. Each touch of the basketball was met with boos, and every trip to the free throw line created another opportunity for fans to voice their frustration. Whether those reactions came from traveling Fever supporters, local fans disappointed by what they had witnessed, or simply neutral spectators responding to the viral moment, one thing was undeniable: the spotlight had shifted almost entirely onto Thomas. What made the reaction so unusual wasn't simply that an opposing player was being booed. That happens in every professional sport. It was the feeling that the criticism followed her throughout the night, long after the collision itself had ended. The replay had already spread across social media, clips were circulating at incredible speed, and thousands of people who weren't even watching the game live were suddenly weighing in. Within minutes, the discussion had grown beyond basketball strategy and into a broader debate about sportsmanship, reputation, and accountability. For many fans, the incident reinforced opinions they already held about Alyssa's style of play. Throughout her career, she has earned respect as one of the league's fiercest competitors. Her willingness to battle through contact, attack the paint relentlessly, and defend with relentless intensity has helped make her one of the WNBA's most accomplished forwards. At the same time, that physical approach has often divided opinion. Supporters see it as old-school toughness that gives her team an edge. Critics argue that she frequently plays on the edge of what officials allow. Because those opinions already existed, many viewers interpreted this latest moment through that same lens. That is often how public perception works in professional sports. Two players can be involved in nearly identical situations, yet receive completely different reactions based on their reputations. A player known for calm sportsmanship may quickly receive the benefit of the doubt after an accidental collision. A player viewed as highly physical or confrontational may find that fans are far less willing to assume good intentions. Whether that's fair or not is open to debate, but reputation often shapes the conversation before all the facts are even discussed. In this case, the online reaction showed just how powerful that effect can be. It made the reaction so unusual wasn't simply that an opposing player was being booed. That happens in every professional sport. It was the feeling that the criticism followed her throughout the night, long after the collision itself had ended. The replay had already spread across social media, clips were circulating at incredible speed, and thousands of people who weren't even watching the game live were suddenly weighing in. Within minutes, the discussion had grown beyond basketball strategy and into a broader debate about sportsmanship, reputation, and accountability. For many fans, the incident reinforced opinions they already held about Alyssa's style of play. Throughout her career, she has earned respect as one of the league's fiercest competitors. Her willingness to battle through contact, attack the paint relentlessly, and defend with relentless intensity has helped make her one of the WNBA's most accomplished forwards. At the same time, that physical approach has often divided opinion. Supporters see it as old-school toughness that gives her team an edge. Critics argue that she frequently plays on the edge of what officials allow. Because those opinions already existed, many viewers interpreted this latest moment through that same lens. That is often how public perception works in professional sports. Two players can be involved in nearly identical situations, yet receive completely different reactions based on their reputations. A player known for calm sportsmanship may quickly receive the benefit of the doubt after an accidental collision. A player viewed as highly physical or confrontational may find that fans are far less willing to assume good intentions. Whether that's fair or not is open to debate, but reputation often shapes the conversation before all the facts are even discussed. In this case, the online reaction showed just how powerful that effect can be. The debate became even more intense because the collision itself appeared to many observers to be an unavoidable basketball play. Numerous fans acknowledged that the elbow occurred during Alyssa Thomas's natural shooting motion and did not appear to be an intentional attempt to injure Hall. Yet many of those same people argued that the visible reaction afterward was what changed everything. Others countered that short video clips can easily be misleading and may not capture the full context of what a player was reacting to in a chaotic game environment. Those competing interpretations fueled hours of discussion across broadcasts, podcasts, and social media, with neither side willing to back down. Meanwhile, the atmosphere inside the arena continued feeding the narrative. Every replay shown on the big screen reignited the crowd, and every possession involving Thomas brought another chorus of boos. Instead of fading into the background as the game progressed, the controversy seemed to grow with each passing minute. The attention no longer centered on who would win the game. It centered on one player whose every movement was now being scrutinized by thousands inside the building and countless more watching online. Perhaps the most significant takeaway was how quickly one moment can redefine the conversation around an athlete. Thomas's resume includes all-star selections, elite playmaking, and years of competing at the highest level. Yet on this night, almost none of those accomplishments dominated the headlines. The focus shifted almost entirely to a few seconds captured on camera and the public's interpretation of them. In today's sports landscape, viral moments can overshadow an entire performance, and once that narrative takes hold, it becomes incredibly difficult to change. But while Alyssa Thomas found herself at the center of the storm, the controversy also exposed a much bigger issue that has been simmering beneath the surface for years. Fans weren't only debating one collision, they were arguing about what kind of basketball they want the WNBA to represent. And that larger conversation was only beginning. As the debate surrounding the collision continued to dominate headlines, another conversation quietly took over basketball circles. Fans were no longer arguing only about Alyssa Thomas or Lexie Hall. They were asking a much bigger question. Where should the line be drawn between playing hard and playing too hard? It's a debate that has followed the WNBA for years, but moments like this have pushed it back into the spotlight with more intensity than ever before. Physical basketball has always been one of the league's defining characteristics. Long before record-breaking television ratings and sold-out arenas became commonplace, WNBA veterans built their reputation on toughness. Every loose ball was a battle. Every rebound came with contact. Every drive to the basket meant absorbing hits that would make most players think twice about attacking the paint again. For many longtime fans, that relentless style is exactly what separates the league from others. They argue that intensity, grit, and physical defense are part of the sport's identity and shouldn't disappear simply because controversial clips spread faster than ever before on social media. But others believe the game has gradually drifted into dangerous territory. They point to several high-profile incidents over the past few seasons involving hard fouls, heated confrontations, and injuries that sparked league-wide debates. Each time one of those moments goes viral, the same discussion returns. Is this simply elite athletes competing at the highest level, or have some players started confusing physical dominance with unnecessary risk? There is no universal answer, which is exactly why every controversial collision creates another wave of disagreement among fans, analysts, and even former players. The arrival of millions of new viewers has only made that divide even more noticeable. Many of these newer fans didn't spend years watching the league develop. Instead, they arrived during its recent surge in popularity, bringing expectations shaped by today's sports culture. They appreciate aggressive competition, but they also expect players to show respect for one another once the whistle blows. When they see an opponent remain on the floor after a hard collision, they naturally pay close attention to how everyone else reacts. In today's game, sportsmanship is often judged just as closely as athletic performance.
That shift has created a fascinating clash between two generations of basketball thinking. One side believes intimidation has always been part of winning championships. They argue that opponents should expect contact and that emotional reactions in the heat of competition shouldn't be overanalyzed. The other side believes the league has entered a new era, one where talent should be celebrated more than intimidation and where player safety deserves greater attention than ever before. Neither perspective completely dismisses physical basketball, but they disagree sharply about where competitive fire ends and unnecessary hostility begins. Social media has poured gasoline on that debate. 20 years ago, controversial plays were discussed on television highlights later that evening. Today, a 6-second clip can be viewed millions of times before the fourth quarter even begins. Every angle gets slowed down, every facial expression gets analyzed, every reaction becomes another headline.
Context often disappears as short videos spread across different platforms, allowing fans to form opinions long before complete replays or post-game interviews become available. The result is that one controversial moment can dominate public conversation for days, regardless of everything else that happened during the game. League officials also find themselves walking a difficult line. Fans want consistency when it comes to officiating, but consistency becomes incredibly difficult when every physical play is slightly different. Some collisions deserve flagrant fouls. Others are simply unfortunate accidents created by two athletes moving at full speed. Officials must make those decisions in real time, while thousands of fans and millions of viewers examine every replay afterward. No matter which decision is made, one side usually leaves convinced that justice wasn't served. Players themselves face an equally difficult challenge. Basketball rewards aggression. Coaches encourage defenders to fight through screens, protect the paint, and never give easy baskets. Yet those same players understand that one split-second decision, or even one misunderstood reaction, can suddenly define public perception. A reputation built over years can change almost overnight once a controversial clip begins circulating online. In today's sports landscape, winning games is no longer the only battle. Managing public opinion has become part of the job as well. Perhaps that's why this incident resonated so far beyond one regular season game. It exposed a league standing at a crossroads. The WNBA is attracting record crowds, expanding its audience, and welcoming millions of first-time viewers. Those new fans are helping the league grow at an incredible pace, but they're also reshaping expectations about how the game should look. Physical basketball isn't disappearing, nor should it. The real question is whether players, coaches, officials, and fans can find common ground on what tough, competitive basketball should look like in this new era. And while that debate continues, one player's influence has quietly transformed almost every arena she visits, even when she's wearing street clothes instead of a uniform. Because as remarkable as this controversy became, it also highlighted something even more extraordinary. The Caitlin Clark effect has grown well beyond one superstar, and it's beginning to reshape the entire league. One of the most surprising parts of this entire story is that Caitlin Clark never checked into the game. She wasn't draining deep three-pointers, throwing full-court passes, or taking over the fourth quarter. In fact, she was unavailable because of injury. Yet somehow she remained the biggest storyline surrounding the matchup before the opening tip and long after the final buzzer. That alone says everything about how dramatically the WNBA has changed over the past 2 seasons. Very few athletes in any professional sport can influence the atmosphere of a game without playing a single second, but Clark has become one of those rare exceptions. When the schedule was first released, this matchup immediately became one of the hottest tickets of the year in Phoenix. For many fans, it represented their only opportunity to watch Clark in person during the regular season. Tickets sold quickly, excitement built for months, and anticipation continued growing as the date approached. Then came the disappointing news that Clark would miss the game due to injury. Normally, that kind of announcement would dramatically reduce excitement surrounding a regular season matchup. In many sports, fans buy tickets specifically to watch one superstar, and when that player is ruled out, the atmosphere often changes completely. But that's not what happened here. Instead of empty seats or disappointed crowds staying home, thousands of fans still packed the arena. Many had traveled specifically to support the Indiana Fever. Others simply wanted to experience the excitement surrounding one of the league's fastest-growing teams. Even without Clark in uniform, they wore Fever jerseys, waved signs, cheered every Indiana basket, and transformed sections of the building into what felt like an extension of Gainbridge Fieldhouse. It was a powerful reminder that the Fever's popularity has grown beyond a single player and evolved into something much larger.
That may be one of the most significant developments for the WNBA as a whole. Clark undoubtedly sparked unprecedented interest in the league, but sustained success depends on more than one superstar. Teams need fans who remain invested regardless of injuries, road trips, or lineup changes. On this night, Fever supporters demonstrated exactly that.
They didn't disappear when Clark couldn't play. They stayed engaged from the opening tip until the final buzzer, proving that the team's identity now extends well beyond its biggest name. The atmosphere inside the arena reflected that reality from start to finish. Every Indiana run generated loud celebrations. Every controversial whistle sparked emotional reactions. Every defensive stop felt like a playoff possession. For stretches of the game, it became difficult to tell which team was actually playing at home. That kind of road support has become increasingly common whenever the Fever travel, and it represents something the league hasn't consistently experienced before. Visiting teams traditionally expect hostile crowds. Indiana, however, is beginning to carry its own crowd into opposing arenas. That growing support also changes the pressure facing every opponent. Teams are no longer preparing only for Indiana's players, they're preparing for the environment surrounding them. Every nationally televised Fever game attracts enormous attention. Every controversial moment spreads across social media within minutes. Every interaction involving Indiana players receives far more discussion than a typical regular season game might have generated just a few years ago. Whether that's fair or not, it's the new reality. When the Fever are involved, the spotlight becomes brighter for everyone sharing the court. The ripple effect extends far beyond attendance figures. Television ratings continue climbing whenever Indiana plays. Merchandise sales remain among the strongest in the league. Opposing franchises often experience some of their biggest home crowds when the Fever visit, creating additional revenue and national exposure. In many ways, Clark's arrival accelerated growth that league officials had hoped to achieve for years. More importantly, that growth hasn't disappeared whenever she's unavailable. The interest remains because fans have become emotionally invested in the team's journey, rivalries, and personalities. Of course, that level of popularity also creates enormous expectations. Every game becomes a national conversation. Every officiating decision is analyzed from multiple angles. Every hard foul, heated exchange, or emotional celebration quickly becomes headline material. Players who face Indiana often discover they're competing in front of an audience much larger than the one inside the arena. Millions of additional viewers are following online, ready to debate every controversial sequence long after the game ends. Perhaps that's what makes this particular night so fascinating. A game that was originally promoted around seeing Caitlin Clark ultimately became memorable for entirely different reasons. Instead of discussing her highlights, basketball fans spent days analyzing crowd reactions, player conduct, and one of the most controversial moments of the season. Yet even in her absence, Clark's influence remained impossible to ignore. The fans who filled the arena, the national attention surrounding the matchup, and the emotional intensity throughout the night all reflected the same undeniable reality. The Fever have become far more than just another basketball team. They have become one of the biggest attractions in professional sports, and every opponent now understands that when Indiana comes to town, the entire league is watching. But with that unprecedented popularity comes another challenge, one that every superstar and every veteran eventually faces. The spotlight doesn't just magnify success, it magnifies reputations as well. And for Alyssa Thomas, the events of this game raised a much bigger question than who won or lost. They raised questions about how athletes are remembered long after the final score is forgotten. When the final buzzer sounded, the box score quickly became an afterthought. Fans weren't debating who led the game in points, who finished with the most rebounds, or which team executed better down the stretch. Instead, the conversation centered on reputation. In today's sports world, a single viral moment can overshadow an entire night's performance, and that's exactly what happened here. For Alyssa Thomas, years of accomplishments suddenly found themselves competing with a few seconds that would be replayed over and over across television broadcasts and social media feeds. Whether fair or unfair, that is the reality modern athletes face every time they step onto the court. What makes this situation especially fascinating is that Thomas's basketball resume is extraordinary by any standard. She has built a career as one of the league's most versatile players, earning all-star selections, competing deep into the playoffs, and establishing herself as one of the WNBA's premier playmakers. Few forwards in league history have matched her combination of strength, vision, rebounding, and defensive intensity. Coaches have trusted her to lead championship-caliber teams, teammates have praised her competitiveness, and opponents have consistently acknowledged how difficult she is to stop. Those accomplishments cannot simply be erased because of one controversial night. But sports history has repeatedly shown that public memory doesn't always work that way. Fans often remember defining moments more vividly than years of steady excellence. Sometimes an unforgettable championship performance becomes the first thing associated with a player forever. Other times, a controversial incident follows an athlete throughout the rest of their career. The internet has only accelerated that process. Viral clips spread around the world within minutes, reaching millions of people who may never watch an entire game, but will remember one dramatic highlight or one controversial replay for years. Fair or not, those brief moments often become part of an athlete's legacy.
That is why perception matters almost as much as performance. Every player develops a reputation over time, shaped not only by statistics, but also by body language, interactions with opponents, emotional reactions, and how they handle adversity. Once that reputation becomes established, fans naturally begin viewing future incidents through the same lens. A player known for calm leadership often receives the benefit of the doubt during controversial moments. A player viewed as highly aggressive or confrontational may find that public opinion moves in the opposite direction almost immediately. The actual play might be nearly identical, but the reaction surrounding it can be completely different. The rise of social media has made changing those perceptions far more difficult than it once was. Years ago, controversial plays faded as the season moved forward because fans had fewer opportunities to revisit them. Today, every clip remains online forever. New viewers discover old moments months or even years later, keeping conversations alive long after the games themselves have ended. One replay can resurface whenever a similar incident occurs, reinforcing existing opinions and making it increasingly difficult for players to redefine how they're viewed. In many ways, athletes are no longer competing only against opponents. They're competing against an endless digital archive of every controversial moment in their careers. At the same time, fan expectations have evolved dramatically. Modern audiences don't just evaluate athletic performance, they also pay close attention to sportsmanship, professionalism, and how players conduct themselves under pressure. Competitive emotion has always been part of basketball, but today's fans often expect visible respect between opponents once the whistle blows. Whether those expectations are entirely fair is a matter of opinion, but they have become an undeniable part of the conversation surrounding professional sports. Every celebration, every reaction, and every exchange now carries the potential to shape public opinion far beyond the arena. That changing landscape affects veterans just as much as rising stars. Every nationally televised game brings millions of viewers, many of whom may be watching certain players for the first time. First impressions can become lasting impressions remarkably quickly. A player's entire career may contain countless examples of leadership, teamwork, and elite basketball, but if a controversial clip becomes someone's introduction to that athlete, it can heavily influence how everything else is interpreted moving forward. That's why moments like this resonate far beyond one regular season game. They become reference points that fans revisit whenever similar situations arise. There is also an important distinction between criticism and legacy. Criticism comes and goes with each news cycle. Legacy lasts much longer. The greatest athletes are often remembered not only for championships or awards, but also for how they responded during difficult moments. Did they acknowledge mistakes? Did they adapt as the game evolved?
Did they earn respect from teammates, opponents, and fans alike? Those questions often become just as important as career statistics when people look back years later. Every veteran eventually reaches a point where preserving that legacy becomes almost as significant as winning the next game. For the WNBA, this represents another sign of its rapid evolution. As the league continues attracting larger audiences and more national attention, every star will experience greater scrutiny than previous generations ever faced. Every emotional moment will be captured from multiple angles. Every controversy will spark hours of debate. Every player's reputation will develop in real time before millions of viewers. That increased attention is a challenge, but it is also evidence of the league's remarkable growth. More people are watching than ever before, and with that attention comes higher expectations for everyone involved. Looking back, it's remarkable how quickly one regular season game expanded into a much broader conversation. What began as an unfortunate collision soon became a debate about sportsmanship, physical basketball, fan culture, reputation, and the future direction of the league itself. Whether opinions ultimately change or remain divided, one thing is certain: this wasn't simply another game on the schedule. It became a snapshot of a league experiencing historic growth, changing expectations, and an entirely new generation of passionate fans who are reshaping the conversation every time they fill an arena. And perhaps that's the biggest story of all, not just what happened during one possession, but what that moment revealed about where the WNBA is headed next. If this game proved anything, it's that the WNBA has entered a completely different era. Just a few years ago, a regular season matchup like this would have generated discussion among dedicated basketball fans before quickly fading into the background. Today, one controversial sequence can dominate sports headlines, generate millions of views online, and spark debates that continue for days. That isn't a sign that the league has a problem. It is a sign that more people are watching than ever before. Every controversial moment now carries far greater weight because the audience has grown beyond its traditional fan base. The biggest change isn't simply higher attendance or improved television ratings. It's the passion of the new audience. Fans are no longer following only their hometown teams. They're traveling across the country, filling opposing arenas, creating playoff-like atmospheres in regular season games, and making their voices heard from the opening tip until the final buzzer. That kind of support changes everything. Home court advantage becomes less predictable, rivalries become more intense, and every nationally televised game feels like a major event rather than just another stop on the schedule.
At the same time, that growth brings entirely new expectations. Every player now performs under a microscope. Every emotional reaction is captured from multiple camera angles. Every controversial whistle becomes a trending topic within minutes. Moments that once would have disappeared after the evening highlights now remain online forever, where millions of people can watch, replay, and debate them repeatedly. Fair or unfair, that level of scrutiny has become part of being a professional athlete in one of the fastest-growing leagues in sports. For the players, adapting to that reality may become just as important as adapting to new opponents. Veterans who built successful careers during a different era now find themselves competing in front of an audience that views the game differently. Younger fans often celebrate fierce competition, but they also expect visible sportsmanship and accountability. That doesn't mean physical basketball has to disappear. Tough defense, aggressive drives, and emotional intensity will always be part of championship basketball. The challenge is understanding that every action after the whistle can now become just as memorable as the play itself. Coaches and organizations face new challenges as well. Building a winning roster is no longer enough. Teams must also build lasting relationships with their communities, create loyal fan bases, and give supporters reasons to identify with the organization beyond wins and losses. The Indiana Fever have demonstrated how powerful that connection can become. Their supporters don't simply attend games, they travel, create unforgettable atmospheres, and continue showing up even when their biggest star isn't available. That's the kind of loyalty every franchise now hopes to build as the league continues expanding. The business side of the WNBA is changing just as quickly. National sponsors are paying closer attention, television networks are dedicating more coverage than ever before, arenas are selling more tickets, merchandise continues reaching new audiences, and social media engagement keeps climbing with every major storyline. Those developments create incredible opportunities, but they also increase the pressure on everyone involved. Every game now has the potential to shape public perception of the league as a whole, making professionalism, consistency, and competitive excellence more important than ever. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that this transformation is still only beginning. The league continues attracting new viewers every week, many of whom are experiencing WNBA basketball for the first time. Those fans are bringing fresh perspectives, different expectations, and enormous enthusiasm. Some longtime supporters embrace those changes, while others worry that the league could lose parts of the identity that helped build it. Finding the right balance between preserving the game's physical competitiveness and embracing a rapidly expanding audience may become one of the defining challenges of the next decade. As for the incident involving Alyssa Thomas and Lexie Hull, opinions will probably remain divided for a long time. Some fans will continue viewing it as an unfortunate basketball collision followed by a reaction that was interpreted in different ways. Others will see it as another example supporting views they already held about physical play and sportsmanship. That's often how memorable sports moments work. Rarely does everyone agree on exactly what happened or what it meant. Instead, those moments become part of the league's larger story, shaping conversations long after the final score has been forgotten. What cannot be debated is the impact this game had on the broader picture. It showcased the incredible drawing power of the Indiana Fever, highlighted the influence of one of the league's fastest-growing fan bases, reignited conversations about physical basketball, and demonstrated just how quickly narratives can spread in today's media landscape. More importantly, it revealed that the WNBA is no longer fighting for attention, it already has it. Millions of people are watching, analyzing, debating, and emotionally investing in every major storyline. And perhaps that's the biggest takeaway of all. The future of the WNBA won't be defined by one controversial collision, one loud crowd, or one viral clip. It will be defined by how the league, its players, and its fans respond as the spotlight grows brighter every single season. If this game is any indication, the next chapter of women's basketball is going to be louder, more passionate, and more closely watched than anything the sport has ever experienced. The only question now is who will embrace that new reality and who will struggle to keep up as the game continues to evolve.